going to discuss portal hypertension and its complications. Right? Till date, we have read about chronic hepatitis as well as jaundice and its evaluation. We all know that in almost all liver diseases, there is always a risk to develop cirrhosis of liver, and after cirrhosis has developed, now it is a complication of portal hypertension. So, what do you mean actually by portal hypertension, and what is the pathophysiology? There is hypertension within the portal system. As I told you in my very first lecture, that portal circulation carries blood from stomach, small intestine, and large intestine above the dentate line from anal canal, and it drains through superior mesenteric vein and inferior mesenteric vein to join splenic vein and forms the portal vein, right? And this portal vein, which carries deoxygenated blood as well as all the nutrients and absorbed nutrients from the gut, which actually reach the liver. As I talked to you in my very first lecture, that liver receives dual blood supply. 70% of its blood comes from the portal vein and 30% of its blood comes from hepatic artery. Right? Hepatic artery is important because it supplies the oxygenated blood. That is for survival of the hepatocytes, that you can understand that every cell of our body needs oxygen. Regarding portal blood supply, you must be knowing that it is not actually, it carries deoxygenated blood, but it is rich in nutrients. It is through this portal vein that all the nutrients taken by you are absorbed and transported to the liver. And then in liver, many of these are taken up and subsequently will be released in systemic circulation through hepatic veins. Now, if there is any pathology at liver level, that is at portal tract, coming again back to your portal tract, you must be remembering my very first lecture that portal tract has radicals from the portal vein as well as branches from the hepatic artery and draining bile duct tubes in it, right? So, if there is pathology of the liver, then as I told you before, also in chronic hepatitis B, C, other autoimmune etiologies, and other um, diseases of liver, what happens? There is stimulation of hepatic stellate cells, which actually leads to formation of myofibroblasts, which lay down collagen fibers, and this collagen fiber can be laid down in, will be laid down in portal tracts also. So, because of the increased fibrosis around the portal tract, the portal venules will be surrounded by fibrosis, and therefore there would be development of uh, increased pressure through which actually the blood has to pass now, right? So it is very important to understand that this fibrosis, which will be laid down within the lobules, that is in the perisinusoidal region, will compress the sinusoids, and as well as it will be laid down around the portal tract, right? So there are two things. One is there is increased resistance, that is actually structural. What I was talking to you was a structural component of portal hypertension. That is laying down collagen, leading to increased liver fibrosis, will be actually altering the microstructure of the liver, and that will increase the resistance of blood flow passing through the liver. As portal vein carries 70% of the blood to the liver, therefore uh, there will be increased resistance to portal blood flow, right? Now there is another component that is known as functional component. Because of laying down of this collagen, there is actually disturbance of various functions of the liver. Now liver is responsible for generation of various vasodilators as well as vasoconstrictors. I will not go into very much molecular details into the things, but for a uh, for understanding this particular aspect of functional, what do you mean by functional resistance? There is alteration of or imbalance of vasodilators and vasoconstrictors within the liver as well as in the portal circulation, right? So what do you mean by that? Do you mean that increased vasoconstrictors happen within the liver? So there is increased constriction of blood vessels within the liver, which will further increase the resistance of blood passing through the liver, right? Now, another aspect that vasodilators would be increased in larger number in the mesenteric circulation. What do you mean by that? There will be more dilatation of the supramesenteric artery, inframesenteric artery, more blood would be, going to the gut, and thereby pooling of blood would start happening within the mesenteric circulation, and increased SMV and IMV as well as clinic vein blood volume would be happening. So this is known as functional component. Here, although there is no other picture to compare, but you can see the portal vein is dilated. So the dilated part is a functional component, right? And here you can see the liver is not dilated. This is kind of fixed thing. We have very less things acting on the structural component, which is actually a fixed one, collagen fibers. Whereas this functional part, because of the alteration of vasodilators and vasoconstrictors, there is increased splanchnic arterial vasodilatation, which will cause pooling of blood in the splanchnic circulation, and that will lead to more increased blood flow. So there are now two things. In portal vein, the liver is giving a resistance. The liver is now giving resistance to the blood which is coming from the portal vein. So portal vein will have a backflow of blood. One thing, right? This is a fixed component. The second thing, because of increased inflow of the blood, there is already increased blood volume. So that will create portal hypertension. Understood? So this will create a portal hypertension kind of thing, and there will be increased splanchnic blood volume remaining within the abdominal cavity. So this is a very good pictorial diagram to show you all these things. How here you can see in a normal liver, if this is the 25% through the hepatic artery, 75% through the portal vein, and this is the hepatic vein which is taking the blood to the IVC and subsequently to the liver, right? Now from there, aorta will arise and blood will go on to other body organs. Now, this liver is cirrhotic, as I've already explained to you. You can see that aorta, which is actually leading on to this is causing splanchnic arterial vasodilatation. Here, the splanchnic arteries are having less blood, right? So there will be increased blood volume within the splanchnic arterioles, right? Now, another thing which is, as I told you, this is because of the alteration of vasodilators and vasoconstrictors within the portal circulation, which is actually caused by liver cirrhosis, right? Because liver is a site for metabolism of various factors, endothelin, you can say so many things actually. They get metabolized in the liver, they are generated in the liver. So all these things, the balance among various aspects is disturbed now. So more and more blood is going to the splanchnic circulation, and similarly, there will be more blood draining into the portal vein now, and because of this, there will be increased blood flow, and because of this, the there will be increased resistance and creation of portal hypertension. But now, very important aspect to understand is less of the blood will be now going out of the liver, right? And now the blood returning to the liver would be, heart would be less through the hepatic vein, will be more through the elsewhere. Here you can see this is the this is to show you this. Look at my arrow where I have placed it. Here the blood from these vessels is very less. However, when the vessels have dilated, what is happening? There is increased number of spontaneous portosystemic shunts, right? So because of increased blood flow through the portal vein, and there is increased resistance to the liver, the blood has to find its way out of the abdominal cavity. So how it will go out? You all know that there will be multiple portosystemic collaterals which will now be opening up to combat this increased blood flow, and they will be entering the systemic circulation through systemic veins through various collaterals, right? And from here it will be reaching to the heart. However, because of all these things, the heart function is also compromised, and this is a fallout of this cirrhosis of liver itself. And I will not go into detail why cardiac function is disturbed, and there will be decreased cardiac output even at the cardiac level. So this is effect of liver which will be happening on the heart, and this is mostly mediated through the various muscles, imbalance of various vasomediators. I'm not going to detail of this. You have to understand that this increased blood flow within the abdominal cavity or splanchnic circulation will be escaping the abdominal cavity through these photosystemic collaterals. Understood? Now, this is a better way to make you understand all these things. This is a normal liver. These are sinusoidal veins which are draining into the central veins. And here is a formation of hepatic vein draining into the inferior vena cava. I don't know how many of people or how many among you have heard of the term HVPG. HVPG is nothing but it is a pressure gradient between hepatic veins and portal veins. So this is a, you can say it is a measure of the whether there is portal hypertension or not. You can understand as such also the pressure within the portal vein should be more than hepatic vein because only then the blood will flow, right? Blood will always flow from the high pressure zone to the low pressure zone, right? So as such also there should be a pressure gradient between the portal vein and hepatic vein, and this is more than 5 millimeter of, this is sorry, less than 5 millimeter of mercury, right? So now what is happening, these are normal sinusoidal veins. However, when there is cirrhosis of liver, what is happening, because of increased, decreased luminal volume, so capacity, and increased fibrosis, there will be turbulence within the liver also. And so this pressure here would be increasing, right? More blood, and with narrowed passages, the pressure in the sinusoidal veins would be increasing and hepatic veins would be low. So HVPG, if more than 5 millimeter of mercury, then we see it is portal hypertension, right? Now, this is a method how to measure portal HVPG. So, clinically, HVPG can be measured. We have to insert a balloon catheter through the internal jugular vein. We enter, and through the internal jugular vein, we go to the SVC, that is superior vena cava, coming out from the right atrium to the inferior vena cava. We insert a balloon catheter, that is at the tip there will be a balloon which would be deflated while putting it, and subsequently we will hook one of the hepatic veins. This is under fluoroscopy guidance, and this is through the interventional radiology department, which will measure the HVPG, right? And then you will be entering the hepatic vein, and you will snug, you will push the catheter until you have reached a smallest vein which could be there, and you have snugged the catheter beyond which point it cannot go, and then you will inflate the balloon. Now you can understand, when the catheter is lying with the deflated balloon, it will measure the pressure of the hepatic vein, right? When the balloon is inflated and the tip is beyond the balloon, right? So now here it is assumed that this will make a column with the sinusoids, right? That column with the sinusoid, the pressure after inflation of balloon, what you will be measuring will be kind of reflection for the sinusoidal pressure, which would be taken as a roughly as portal pressure, right? So you will decrease free hepatic vein pressure, and this is wedged hepatic vein pressure, means after the balloon has been inflated you will measure, and this difference is actually HVPG, right? This is a portal vein hepatic portal vein gradient, which will actually make you understand regarding the portal hypertension. So here we can understand this is at 8 and this is at 30, so it is around 22. So this is a very significant portal hypertension which patient has developed. There is large pressure gradient between the portal vein and the hepatic veins, right? So this is actually so routinely we do not do these things. This is only to understand things in a better fashion at your level, so that you are not confused, right? So now why actually I needed to tell you all these things, because coming here, so the portal hypertension can again be at three levels, right? It can be at this level, sinusoidal level, very, very important. Many causes of portal hypertension are there. Sinusoidal level portal hypertension causes are mainly because of cirrhosis of liver. Sometimes when there is cardiac failure in right heart failure, then also because of the back pressure within the IVC and hepatic veins, there will be, creation of portal hypertension. right? Here HVPG may not be increased, but you can understand there will be increased resistance to the blood flow because of the right heart failure. So this will be known as post hepatic heart failure, post hepatic portal hypertension. And to sum up, there can be a portal hypertension which may be at this portal vein at entry point. Suppose there is a thrombosis of portal vein at this point only, liver is absolutely normal, but what is happening, that you have portal vein which is actually obstructed, and because of that there will be creation of increased portal pressures within the portal vein at rest of the pre-obstruction, right? So I hope you could understand this, and why I am taking all these things, because once you go for causes of classification of portal hypertension, this will be a huge causes like prehepatic before the liver is normal, but still there is portal hypertension. The most common causes are related to splenomegaly, which may be related to hematological disorders where there are gross splenic enlargement, massive splenic enlargement. So there is very much pooling of blood within the spleen. 1.5 to 2 liters of blood gets pooled up within the spleen, which leads to increased splenic blood flow and creation of a functional portal hypertension. Here the liver is absolutely normal, there is no problem as such in portal vein, but there is increased blood flow because of pooling of blood within the spleen due to certain other things. So these parameters, hemodynamic characteristics, will be absolutely normal in those patients. Coming to intrahepatic, sinusoidal is our concern, where cirrhosis of liver would happen, and that will lead to elevated HUPG. And pre-sinusoidal, I will not go into detail of all this, but then there is post-hepatic portal hypertension, which will include all the causes of chronic right heart failure and hepatic vein thrombosis or Budd-Chiari syndrome, right? I'm not going to detail of these things, but I hope that you could understand that portal hypertension, it can be because of um, multiple causes, maybe because of large splenomegaly, which is a reflection not of the liver but of the any other systemic disease, and that may lead to functional portal hypertension. Similarly, cardiac disorders in which there is right heart failure, and because of back pressure there may be formation of ascites and so in creation of portal hypertension, right? But cirrhosis of liver is the most common cause for causing portal hypertension, and this is actually where we should concentrate while we are learning liver diseases, right? So this I will skip now. Coming to this, now I hope that you could understand that here is the I have already told you the portal hypertension has been created. Now you have to decompress. I told you there will be opening up of the portosystemic collateral. So where are those collaterals lying? I hope you have learned all these things, all these small facts in your anatomy days, where practical aspects were always given after your anatomy part, and they have actually told you that there are certain collaterals which are actually normally collapsed at the gastroesophageal junction, which actually gets opened up when there is formation, when there is creation of portal hypertension. Now left gastric vein normally drains into the portal vein, but once there is portal hypertension the blood will flow back through the left gastric vein, and so it will be draining, opening up of the collaterals at lower esophageal junction would happen, and that will form gastroesophageal collaterals, and this blood now will be draining to the esophageal vein. So from stomach, instead of draining through the liver, the blood will pass through the esophagus, and it is utmost important that it will be draining through the from the esophageal veins to the esophagus vein and then to the superior vena cava, right? You remember the circulation. So a bypass has happened, and normally what these collaterals are actually collapsed. They are there, but they are collapsed. Once there is a compromise at liver level, so these collaterals will be opening. But opening up of these collaterals will again cause problem. There will be dilated veins at the lower esophageal junction, which will be problematic, right? So increased pressure and so many things can actually lead to rupture of these veins, and then they will be called as varices, and it can cause variceal bleed. Similarly, the blood will be, pulling back in the spleen, and there will be creation of splenomegaly, and that is why in cirrhosis of liver you have splenomegaly. But mind well, the splenomegaly caused by cirrhosis of liver is usually mild to moderate. It is never massive. right? Massive splenomegaly is primarily caused by either hematological disorders or infiltrative disorders, but it is not primarily by cirrhosis of liver. There will be enlargement of the spleen, however, it will be a mild splenomegaly, right? Other collaterals, which you all know, that the umbilical vein, which is in the fetal circulation, which brings the blood from the umbilical vein uh, to the liver through the falciform ligament. But now these things have actually, after the neonatal part, after the birth, these channels get closed, right? But they are existent in our body. So once there is creation of the portal hypertension, what would happen? These channels would be opening up again, and there will be dilatation of the umbilical vein collaterals, and they will bypass the blood from the abdominal wall veins, which will be at anterior abdominal walls, to the systemic veins, and finally they will be draining to the inferior vena cava. So clinically, you will have dilated veins all over the around the umbilicus, right? That is known as caput medusae, right? So clinically, these veins will be visible. Here, hemorrhoidal collaterals will also be getting opened up. We know that upper two-thirds of the rectum and anal canal, they go to the portal circulation, whereas the lower one-third goes to the systemic circulation. So because of increased pressure within the inferior mesenteric vein, there will be opening up of these collaterals and formation of hemorrhoidal veins, actually, which can also bleed, but bleeding through these veins is very less. There may be opening up of this splenorenal shunt, as well as collaterals on the posterior abdominal wall, which I'm not going into detail. Clinically, what is important for us is actually that most of the time, cirrhosis, patients of cirrhosis will have splenomegaly. Second thing, umbilical vein collaterals will be very, very important for us to examine the patient clinically. We will have caput medusae and dilated abdominal veins. The blood will be flowing away from the umbilicus. That is utmost important. And the third site, which is actually most important regarding complications of portal hypertension, is dilatation of the creation of gastroesophageal collaterals at lower esophagus, and creation of esophageal varices and variceal bleed. Now, coming to this, as I've already told you, this is a normal vein at the lower end of esophagus. You can see from the stomach the blood is draining up, and from here it is going down to the left gastric vein. However, the veins are compressed. However, during cirrhosis of liver, these veins will be dilated and they will be known as esophageal varices. Right? Now, as I've already told you, once the portal hypertension goes beyond a certain limit, that is HPG, suppose it is more than 12 millimeter of mercury, or it is more than 20, it is very, very significant that variceal hemorrhage would happen in those patients, right? So, coming to a patient, if a patient you receive with a variceal hemorrhage, how will you manage? So the best way to manage is, you will first assess whenever you receive this such kind of patient in your emergency ward, emergency department. You have to check the vitals of the patient. What are those? You have to check the pulse of the patient, blood pressure and saturation of the patient, and you have to send the hemoglobin as soon as possible. Taking the IV line, you have to send the hemoglobin of the patient, which is utmost essential. And your first goal in case of in emergency department for variceal hemorrhage is to achieve hemodynamic stabilization. Now you have to maintain systolic blood pressure at least more than 90 millimeter of mercury. That may be with IV fluids, that is normal saline, colloids, dextran can be used, right? Um, if you have massive blood loss, and then subsequently your aim should be to maintain hemoglobin level at around 7 to 8 grams per deciliter with PRBC, packed red blood cell transfusion as needed. Right now, after you have stabilized the patient, you should further try to assess the cause of the bleed, and that is whether patient had history of pain epigastrium, which would be suggesting duodenal ulcer or peptic ulcer disease. Coming to amount of hematemesis, if there is a large hematemesis which is well tolerated profuse bleed, it suggests the variceal bleed. Now you can examine your patient with presence of stigmata of cirrhosis like splenomegaly, spider nevi, caput medusae, dilated veins, white nails, peritonidomegaly, and gynecomastia and else. Now, coming to management of variceal bleed, you must be knowing that, okay, fine, we will be starting IV pantoprazole infusion because at the first, when we receive the patient in emergency department, we have to give a empirical treatment, and then we have to go ahead with further investigations, and then subsequently we should plan a definitive therapy. So, what is empirical treatment? We will treat the patient for whatever can be the possible cause. So, normally, variceal hemorrhage is the most common cause at present. However, in past, jodhal ulcer used to be the very common cause. Now there is a change in epidemiology, shift in epidemiology for causes of upper GI bleed. That is, variceal bleeds are more common as compared to peptic ulcer disease, and but we start with both of their treatment. That is, IV pantoprazole infusion at the rate of 8 milligram per hour for next 24 to 48 hours, that is 1 to 2 days, would be started in these patients. And IV terlipressin 1 milligram every 6 hours would be given for 2 to 5 days. And if there is no control of bleed, then the infusion can be, sorry, this is not 2 milligram per hour. I'm sorry, but it is 2 milligram every 6 hours if they need. Right? IV octreotide was used in past, which was in dose of 25 to 50 microgram per hour, and for next 24 to 48 hours. However, it is less effective than terlipressin. Now you can look at this table, and here also they have said that the terlipressin is one which is actually very, very important, although they have used higher doses. But what we are using, I have told you, and octreotide is actually is very important also, but it is less effective than the terlipressin. Now I will just tell you what terlipressin would do. Terlipressin will cause pancreatic arterial vasoconstriction, so it will reduce the splanchnic blood flow. Right? I told you very first in my very first slide today, in very first two slides today, that there will be splanchnic arterial vasodilatation because of imbalance of vasoconstrictors and vasomediators. Now, this terlipressin is a vasopressin analog, which is actually very, very selective to cause vasoconstriction selectively only on splanchnic arterial circulation, and that will cause splanchnic arterial vasoconstriction, and that will reduce the splanchnic blood flow, and this will reduce the portal vein blood flow. As I've already told you, 70% is for out of portal hypertension, 70% is a structural part which is very difficult to manage, right? But functional part, which is 30%, can be managed with medical therapy, a bit of it, not exactly the whole of it, right? Now, after patient is hemodynamically stable and you have searched the specific cause for it, and you have documented suppose cirrhosis of liver, then you can stop the IV pantoprazole infusion and continue on medical therapy only, with terlipressin or octreotide, and then you can plan your upper GI endoscopy within next 12 to 24 hours after hemodynamic stabilization is achieved. So one thing is very, very important: unless there is hemodynamic stabilization, you should not aim to take patient for upper GI endoscopy. Coming to secondary prophylaxis. So what is secondary prophylaxis? Is primary prophylaxis I will talk in my first slide. Once the variceal hemorrhage has happened, now you will be discharging your patient. So now you have to give prophylaxis to your patient, treatment to your patient, to not to have recurrent episodes of variceal bleeds. As I have already told you, the esophageal variceal ligation, which would be done in these cases, which will cause variceal ligation, will induce thrombosis and obstruction of the veins which have been created at the lower end of esophagus. But mind well, a single session of esophageal variceal ligation would not be able to do so. And if you could understand the pathophysiology of portal hypertension well in the present lecture, then you can imagine that obstruction of the veins is not the solution to the problem. It is not going to solve your portal hypertension. You are just closing the veins, and subsequently what would be happening, another veins would be opening at lower esophagus. There are many veins. पहले 10 open थी, अब दूसरी 10 open हो जाएंगी. So you will need actually sessions of endoscopy which will actually handle these varices which would be created in long run. And so you have to, systematically at frequent time intervals, you have to repeat the endoscopically and repeatedly ligate those varices which will be created, right? We are not doing anything to reduce portal hypertension. This is very important. This is not to reduce portal hypertension. We are just obstructing the esophageal veins, right? So portal hypertension is there where it was. So for that, you have drugs like propranolol, beta blockers. This is a very important drug. Again, the beta blockers would be the same. It will reduce the vasodilation within the splenic arteries, what Shirley Patient was doing. So this is a very important drug. So once the bleed has happened, you have to go dual way. Dual way means you have to start patient on beta blockers, as well as you have to plan the patient for esophageal variceal ligation to handle those dilated veins which are present at the lower esophagus. And those sessions can be repeated every 4 to 6 weeks till you have eradicated all the varices, right? And subsequently, patient should be monitored every 1 to 2 years or 6 months to 12 months with endoscopy for that repeat varices have not been formed.